One of Street Outlaws' most controversial stars has completely vanished from the racing scene, and the truth behind his disappearance is darker than anyone imagined. John Odom, the man who brought one of the fastest GTRs in the world to No Prep Kings, hasn't been seen at a single race in 20. His social media went silent, his racing team disbanded, and whispers in the drag racing community hint at something far more sinister than mechanical problems or sponsor disputes. The reality involves a wrongful death lawsuit, allegations of witnessing a brutal murder, and a friendship that ended in the most tragic way possible. John Odom's story starts in the most unlikely place, behind bars. Back in 2002, he was convicted of grand theft and writing bad checks, serving 7 years in an Idaho prison. Most people would see this as the end of their story, but for Odom, it was just the beginning. Prison didn't break him, it forged him into something harder, more determined. When he walked out in 2012, he had a plan that most people thought was impossible. The same hands that once wrote bad checks were now building an empire. Odom founded HMH Construction in Boise, and within a few years the company was pulling in millions from high-end residential projects across Idaho and Texas. The ex-convict had transformed himself into a legitimate businessman, but the adrenaline rush of criminal life had been replaced by something else entirely: the need for speed. Odom's obsession with drag racing began with a simple Nissan GTR, but simple wasn't enough. He threw open the modification floodgates, gutting the car and installing a screw-blown Hemi engine that transformed the GTR into a 7-second monster capable of over 200 mph. This wasn't just another fast car. It was engineering madness that caught attention at TX2K and other major GTR events, where Odom consistently dominated the competition. The racing success led to television opportunities, first appearing on shows with JJ DeBoss before catching the eye of No Prep Kings producers. When Odom rolled up to his first NPK event in Idaho with his insane GTR, veteran racers knew they were looking at something special. The combination of his larger-than-life personality, incredible backstory, and that screaming GTR made for perfect television. Discovery Channel loved the narrative, the reformed criminal turned millionaire businessman taking on the country's fastest racers. By 2022, Odom was named NPK Rookie of the Year, cementing his place among drag racing's elite. His Instagram showed the lifestyle everyone dreamed of: expensive cars, luxury travel, and the respect of his peers. But maintaining a top-tier racing operation requires serious money, even for a millionaire. That's when fate introduced him to someone whose story was even more incredible than his own, a man who had lost 20 years of his life to a crime he didn't commit, and who was about to become Odom's biggest supporter and closest friend. Christopher Tapp became John Odom's biggest financial backer, but their relationship was built on one of the most tragic stories in American criminal justice history. Tapp had spent 20 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, the 1996 killing of 18-year-old Angie Dodge in Idaho Falls. The case was a perfect storm of coerced confessions, false testimony, and tunnel vision that destroyed an innocent man's life. Tapp was just 20 when investigators zeroed in on him as a suspect. Despite his DNA not matching evidence at the crime scene, police subjected him to relentless interrogations and multiple polygraph tests. Under this psychological pressure, Tapp eventually gave a false confession that implicated himself and 2 friends in the brutal Rosepen murder. The confession contained details that prosecutors claimed only the killer would know, but investigators had actually fed him this information during unrecorded sessions. In 2019, genetic genealogy technology finally proved what Tapp had been saying for over 2 decades: he was completely innocent. The real killer, Brian Drips, had been living across the street from the victim and was actually interviewed by police days after the murder. Drips confessed and was sentenced to life in prison, making Tapp the first person in history to be exonerated using genetic genealogy. The state of Idaho eventually paid Tapp $11.4 million in compensation for stealing 2 decades of his life. Most people might have retreated from the world after such trauma, but Tapp chose to live fully and help others who had suffered similar injustices. He became an advocate for wrongful conviction compensation laws and used his settlement money to support causes he believed in, including backing John Odom's racing dreams. The partnership made perfect sense on paper. Both men had been through the criminal justice system, both had rebuilt their lives from nothing, and both understood what it meant to fight against the odds. Tapp's money funded major upgrades to Odom's racing operation, turning it into a serious contender that could compete with teams backed by major sponsors. More importantly, the 2 men developed a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared experiences. For Tapp, supporting Odom Racing wasn't just about fast cars, it was about living the life that had been stolen from him. He attended races, celebrated victories, and finally experienced the kind of excitement and camaraderie that prison had denied him. But this friendship, built on triumph over adversity, would soon face the ultimate test in a Las Vegas hotel room. October 2023 was supposed to be a celebration. John Odom hosted a lavish Halloween party at the luxurious Resorts World in Las Vegas to celebrate a new sponsorship deal for his GTR. After years of grinding to build his racing operation, Odom was finally reaching the next level. Corporate sponsors were taking notice, and the future looked incredibly bright. The guest list reflected his rising status in both business and racing circles. Among the attendees was Dan Rodimer, a former professional wrestler who had transitioned into politics, running unsuccessfully for Congress in Nevada. Rodimer was exactly the kind of high-profile contact that could open doors for Odom's growing empire. The party was meant to be a networking opportunity disguised as a celebration, with Odom's closest friend and business partner Christopher Tapp in attendance to share in the success that his financial backing had made possible. The Resorts World Suite was the perfect backdrop for the evening, expensive, exclusive, and impressive enough to make a statement about Odom's success. Guests mingled, drinks flowed, and for a while, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Odom was in his element, playing the role of successful businessman and racing star, surrounded by people who could help take his operation to the next level. But beneath the surface, tensions were building that nobody could have predicted. According to court documents filed later, the evening took a dark turn when Christopher Tapp allegedly offered cocaine to Rodimer's stepdaughter. Whether this actually happened or was a misunderstanding doesn't matter. What matters is that Rodimer believed it was true, and his reaction would be swift and brutal. The party atmosphere evaporated in an instant. What had started as a celebration of success was about to become a nightmare that would destroy lives and end a friendship in the most tragic way imaginable. The luxury suite at Resorts World, with its expensive furnishings and strip views, became the setting for an alleged assault so vicious that guests could hear the violence from other rooms. Within minutes, everything John Odom had worked to build, his reputation, his relationships, his racing career, would begin to crumble. The man who had overcome prison and poverty to become a millionaire racing star was about to face accusations that would make his previous legal troubles look trivial. And Christopher Tapp, who had already lost 20 years of his life to injustice, was fighting for his life in a hotel bedroom while his friend allegedly made a decision that would haunt him forever. The lawsuit filed by Christopher Tapp's mother paints a damning picture of what happened in that Las Vegas hotel suite. According to the complaint, John Odom wasn't just a bystander to the tragedy, he was an active participant in what prosecutors call a cover-up that may have cost his friend his life. The allegations are so serious that they've essentially ended Odom's career before any trial has even begun. Court documents claim that Odom was in the master bedroom when Dan Rodimer allegedly attacked Christopher Tapp. This wasn't a brief scuffle that happened too quickly to intervene. Witnesses reported hearing two distinct, loud banging noises that echoed through the suite. Everyone at the party knew something terrible was happening, but instead of rushing to help, they allegedly waited for instructions from the host. What happened next is the most damning part of the accusations. According to the lawsuit, after the attack ended, both Odom and Rodimer emerged from the bedroom together. Instead of immediately calling for medical help for his friend and business partner, Odom allegedly did something that defies comprehension. He loudly told everyone at the party not to call security or police. The man who had funded Odom's racing dreams, who had trusted him with millions of dollars, was lying unconscious and bleeding in the next room, and Odom allegedly chose protecting himself over saving his friend's life. The lawsuit claims that Tapp remained concussed on the bedroom floor for a significant period of time while precious minutes ticked away. These weren't just any minutes, they were potentially the difference between life and death for someone with a severe head injury. When security finally arrived, Odom allegedly compounded the cover-up by lying about what had happened, claiming that Tapp had simply slipped and fell. Medical personnel didn't arrive for another 20 to 30 minutes. Odom's attorney vehemently denies these accusations, claiming his client wasn't even present when Tapp was injured and was never questioned by police about the incident. But the damage was already done. The racing community, built on loyalty and brotherhood, was horrified by the allegations. How could someone watch their friend and financial backer get beaten and do nothing to help? The story becomes even more twisted when you consider that Tapp had already lost 20 years of his life to injustice, only to allegedly have his final moments ignored by someone he trusted with his life and fortune. 5 days later, Christopher Tapp died in the hospital from blunt force trauma to the head. The Clark County coroner ruled it a homicide, and suddenly John Odom found himself at the center of a murder investigation. Dan Rodimer was charged with murder, and pleaded not guilty, but the spotlight had already turned to Odom's role in the alleged cover-up. The racing star who had overcome prison to build a $1 million empire was watching everything crumble in real time. As 2024 began, John Odom's absence from the No Prep Kings circuit became impossible to ignore. The man who had been Rookie of the Year just 2 seasons earlier was nowhere to be found. His social media accounts, once filled with racing content and lifestyle posts, went silent. Odom Racing, the team that had promised to revolutionize GTR drag racing, effectively ceased to exist. But his problems went far beyond just missing races. The legal troubles began piling up like cars in a multi-vehicle accident. Beyond the wrongful death lawsuit from Tap's mother, Odom faced multiple judgments for unpaid business debts. Racing vendors who had supplied parts and services to his operation claimed they hadn't been paid. Other racers alleged that Odom owed money from side bets made at various events. The financial empire that had seemed so solid was apparently built on a foundation of unpaid obligations. The most humiliating blow came when Odom was arrested and jailed in Ada County, Idaho for contempt of court. The charge wasn't related to the Las Vegas incident. It was for owing $60,000 in unpaid alimony to his ex-wife. The man who had once flashed $1 million cars and luxury lifestyle on social media was sitting in jail because he couldn't or wouldn't pay his basic legal obligations. There was no option for bail, meaning Odom had to serve his time until the debt was satisfied. The racing community's reaction was swift and brutal. Sponsors distanced themselves from anything associated with Odom Racing. Fellow drivers who had once celebrated his success now avoided mentioning his name. The No Prep Kings series continued without him, and nobody seemed to miss the drama he had brought to the sport. Track owners became reluctant to allow him to compete, even if he somehow managed to rebuild his operation. The allegations surrounding Tap's death had made Odom radioactive in a sport where reputation and relationships matter more than raw speed. Today, John Odom exists in a strange limbo between his former success and an uncertain future. The man who once commanded respect on the fastest drag strips in America has been effectively blacklisted from the sport that made him famous. His custom GTR, once featured in magazines and admired by racing fans worldwide, sits unused while legal battles consume his time and resources. The transformation from racing star to pariah happened so quickly that many fans are still trying to understand what went wrong. The wrongful death lawsuit continues to move through the courts, with Tap's mother seeking damages not just from Rodimer, but from everyone she believes contributed to her son's death through negligence or deliberate inaction. For Odom, this means facing potential financial liability that could dwarf even his construction fortune. The lawsuit alleges that his failure to seek immediate medical attention contributed to Tap's death, a claim that carries both civil and potentially criminal implications. Meanwhile, Odom's business empire shows signs of serious strain. His construction company, which once generated millions in revenue, was reportedly closed due to pandemic impacts and high interest rates. The racing operation that Tap's money had funded is essentially defunct, with equipment scattered and team members moved on to other opportunities. The lifestyle that social media had showcased, luxury cars, expensive travel, exclusive events, has been replaced by court appearances and legal meetings. Perhaps most significantly, Odom's reputation in the tight-knit drag racing community may be irreparably damaged. Racing culture values loyalty, honor, and looking out for your crew above everything else. The allegations that he witnessed his friend's fatal assault and chose self-preservation over helping directly contradict these fundamental values. Even if he's eventually cleared of legal wrongdoing, the court of public opinion in racing circles has already rendered its verdict. Odom maintains his innocence through his legal team, insisting that he wasn't present during the alleged assault and had no opportunity to help Tap. But the damage extends beyond just the Las Vegas incident. The mounting business debts, unpaid alimony, and general financial chaos paint a picture of someone whose life was already spinning out of control before the tragedy occurred. The question now isn't whether Odom can return to racing success, it's whether he can avoid prison himself and rebuild any semblance of the life he once had. The fall of John Odom represents one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune in Street Outlaws history. In less than 2 years, he went from being celebrated as NPK Rookie of the Year to being completely ostracized from the racing community he once dominated. The allegations surrounding Christopher Tap's death have essentially ended his career, regardless of what happens in court. What makes this story particularly tragic is how it destroyed not just one life, but echoed the injustice that had already defined Tap's existence. Here was a man who had lost 20 years to a wrongful conviction, only to allegedly have his life ended while his friend and business partner stood by and did nothing. The irony is devastating. Tapp survived 2 decades in prison for a crime he didn't commit, only to allegedly die because someone he trusted failed to act when it mattered most. The racing community's reaction tells us everything about what really matters in this sport. Raw speed and expensive cars mean nothing without character and loyalty. Odom's screw-blown GTR was undeniably fast, and his driving skills were legitimate. But none of that matters when your reputation is destroyed. The same community that celebrated his comeback story from ex-convict to racing star has now completely rejected him based on allegations alone. For Street Outlaws fans, Odom's disappearance serves as a reminder of how quickly everything can change. The show has always attracted colorful characters with complicated pasts, but there's usually a redemption arc involved. Odom's story appears to be moving in the opposite direction, from redemption back toward destruction. Whether he can somehow rebuild his life depends largely on the outcome of ongoing legal proceedings. The broader lesson here might be about the true cost of success, and the choices we make when everything is on the line. Odom spent years building his empire, his reputation and his relationships, only to allegedly make a single decision that destroyed it all. If the allegations are true, he chose self-preservation over friendship when it mattered most, and that choice cost him everything he had worked to achieve. As for what really happened to John Odom from Street Outlaws, he's still alive, unlike his friend Christopher Tapp, but the career, reputation, and lifestyle that made him famous are gone, possibly forever. Sometimes the fastest cars can't outrun the consequences of our actions, and in Odom's case, those consequences may have cost him everything that mattered.